One of the fights with the highest stakes in Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba is between Tanjiro, Giyu, and Akaza. As Tanjiro and Giyu make their way through the Infinity Castle, doors open into floors and ceilings shake around them. The castle is alive and realizes the best way to kill them is to split them up. But just as the two focus on being together to reach Muzan and stop him, a crow appears and shouts that Shinobu Kocho, the insect Ashira, has been killed. This completely throws Tanjiro's mind off balance, tears streaming down his face. Giyu, though shocked, still has the presence of mind to notice the talisman, paper thingy, on the crow's head, wondering what its use is. Just then, the young Ubuyashiki successor is shown, frantically analyzing the situation while sending out orders to the members of the Demon Slayer Corps. He and his surviving family, two sisters, Kuina and Kanata, also wear the same talisman, receiving a view of the battlefield and providing insight into the situation. Although the successor named Kirya is only 8 years old and has just lost most of his family due to Muzan's appearance, his mind is dedicated to the battle and to keeping the Hashira and Demon Slayers alive long enough to end Muzan once and for all. He does not cry, he won't even let a single tear fall, not until this is over. The paper talisman that the three children wear has the effect of sharing Yushiro's vision from the crows flying around the battlefield to the person who has it attached to their head. They're called the Eyes, and Kirya wants to make sure the crows get as many to the fighters as they can. Back to Tanjiro and Giyu, they worry that the others are already risking their lives and they have yet to encounter one of the upper rank demons. And as if spoken into being, a veiny fist breaks through the wall above floor after floor after floor above their heads. Giyu and Tanjiro have no idea what is happening besides a rattling of the building itself, almost like an earthquake making its way towards them. Tanjiro, mind still reeling from Shinobu's death, frantically panics, wondering if this is someone fighting, someone else about to die, and Giyu has a shout to calm his worrying. But the one thing that will never betray Tanjiro is his sense of smell, and that warns him of an incoming demon at the same time that Giyu orders him to move out of the way. And with a loud crash and nearly breaking the floor they're standing on, Akaza lands in front of them. With the wood that Akaza had broken still flying in all directions, he greets Tanjiro with a sick smile, surprised he hasn't been killed yet considering his abilities. That is, when he met him during the fight with Rengoku. Akaza, tightening his muscles, dashes towards Tanjiro in a flash, with Tanjiro roaring out his name in remembrance of what he did during that time as well. Tanjiro does not wait a moment, immediately activating a fire wheel with his sun-breathing technique. As Akaza's fist flies towards him, the attack sends Tanjiro into the air, flipping over his head and safely out of harm's way. At the same time, Tanjiro tries to slice through Akaza's arm, knowing if he can't do that, then there is no chance of him beheading the demon. Giyu watches with intensity, Akaza almost unbelieving himself as Tanjiro cuts the limb from Akaza's body with a fierce shout. Relieved this move was a success, Tanjiro plans his next attack, but Akaza is already there, all healed up. His fist inches from Tanjiro's face, ready to strike before Tanjiro can even finish his thought. Thankfully, Tanjiro uses Mach Sun Rainbow and dodges the attack to Akaza's shock, ending up behind the demon again. As Akaza realizes his attack missed the Slayer, he turns around and a deep slash opens across his face. Another victory for Tanjiro. All Giyu can do is wait for his chance to move in, standing in awe of Tanjiro's amazing advancement in breathing techniques, even comparing him to Hashira level at this point. The comparison of this strong, relentless Slayer versus how Giyu first met him groveling in the snow is beyond night and day. You can tell, even from just those two techniques, that Tanjiro will not die or lose anything to this demon. And almost as if reading Giyu's thoughts, Akaza announces he agrees with how Kyojo Rengoku had described Tanjiro in the past. He is strong, and he acknowledges that now. He respects him even for getting to this level. But that also means Akaza will no longer hold back. With a stance having no openings, the demon unleashes his blood demon art, a wave of power surrounding his body and forming a compass on the ground beneath him. Akaza smiles with the realization of how fun this fight will be. Sensing the battle has switched gears, Giyu lets off his first water breathing technique, Flowering Dance. Giyu glides around the room with unmatched elegance and ease, forming circles of water around him and dodging each and every attack. This both excites and impresses Akaza, who cheerfully announces that it has been years since he has last fought a water Hashira. Akaza wastes no time in answering the attack with one of his own, Destructive Death, Chaotic Type. An explosion of power shoots from his fists, creating a wall that can barely be seen through. Giyu ignores the demon and instead uses his 11th form, Dead Calm, forcing the chaos to dissipate in a fraction of a second and go around him. With that display of mastery, Akaza brightens up even more, having never witnessed such an attack from the water Ashira he killed. Tanjiro does not let that moment of distraction pass him as he leaps in and uses Hinokami Kagura's Raging Sun. The technique creates a circle of fire and heat, but Akaza is nowhere to be seen, instead once again appearing behind Tanjiro with the clear intent of striking his head from his shoulders. Before the demon can land the attack with his hand sharp like a blade, Tanjiro unleashes Mach Sun, aiming to stop the momentum in time. Giyu joins in with Water Wheel, a move Tanjiro has used in the past as well, both of them severing Akaza's arm successfully. Not that it lasts with Akaza's outrageous regenerative capabilities. But then, the real fight begins. With Giyu struggling to keep Akaza back, Tanjiro aims for Akaza's legs to make him lose balance with Flame Dance. But Akaza, aware of this plan, switches to his leg techniques and launches Tanjiro smoothly into the air with a kick named Crown Splitter. Having blocked most of the effect of his sword, Tanjiro is able to survive, but blood still bursts from his nose by just being grazed by it. Giyu jumps in front to give Tanjiro a moment to recover, swinging his sword effectively and with enough grace to be praised by Akaza. Akaza demands to know Gyu's name, but Giyu refuses to both give his name and to speak because he does not like talking. Akaza laughs, admitting that he will just keep asking his name then, unleashing another destructive death-leg move. This time he uses Explosive Flurry, which is so fast, so many kicks at once, that Giyu gets launched into the air, breaking through a number of walls as he flies backwards. Worrying for his comrade, Tanjiro screams out for him as Akaza appears, very much pleased after finally learning the Water Ashira's name. With not a moment to lose, Tanjiro prepares a technique and Akaza prepares a counter one. Burning Bones, Summer Sun, and 8-layer Demon Core unleash at the very same time. The timing, thankfully, helps Tanjiro avoid being thrown too far back, sliding across the floor with the intensity of the techniques. Akaza really can't help but be impressed by how much Tanjiro has improved in such a short span of time, even thanking Kyojuro for having a hand in his growth. Akaza cracks his fingers, smiling contentedly at Tanjiro as the Slayer tries to catch his breath. Then, when Akaza admits that this would not have been possible without Kyojuro's death and how worthless his values were compared to the opportunity of becoming the strongest demon, Tanjiro freezes. All his panting stops, his eyes unblinking. A flash of Kyojuro comes to mind, and his gaze turns more monstrous than some of the demons he has fought in the past. With that, Tanjiro threatens Akaza to stop talking of Kyojuro, not to say another word about his dear friend. Akaza doesn't understand the problem when he simply dislikes weaklings and is praising Kyojuro for getting Tanjiro to this point. As Akaza goes on to compare weak people to weeds that need to be taken out by nature, Tanjiro counters with the fact that Akaza too was once weak and in need of protection and help from others. Tanjiro declares this will be the end of Akaza and his flawed way of thinking, and for some reason, this makes Akaza tense and clench his fists, the veins practically bursting out of his skin. With the focus shifted to Akaza's thoughts, we discovered that instinctively, Akaza has no tolerance for Tanjiro. Realizing it no longer has to do with him being a weakling, as he's clearly demonstrated his massive growth as a demon slayer, Akaza continues to be irritated and annoyed by his very existence. Something about him scratches at Akaza in the wrong way, pushing into a frustration that others had not before. A warm hand presses to Akaza's shoulder, echoing the words that Tanjiro has just spoken to him. The unknown man continues with his advice, saying that Akaza's true opponent is himself and he should strive to surpass the self he was yesterday. With that behavior, Akaza would be able to help others easily in only a few years. Akaza, already on the edge from the words, aims to strike the man's head, but hits nothing but the air. The man is not there anymore. This sudden display startles Tanjiro, who wonders why a fighter with such pinpoint accuracy such as Akaza would be hitting an empty space. But because Akaza has been reminded of unpleasant memories from his past, this fuels his previous annoyance and turns into a boiling fury. Akaza launches himself across the space using his 10,000 leaves, flashing willow technique, all to block out the thoughts of his past and keep living in the now. Each blow is powerful and so fast that Tanjiro can barely dodge, none of these strikes losing any of their power nor missing their mark. With sweat beating down Tanjiro's face, he tries to hold his ground, knowing that something has changed. Then Akaza is right up in his face, switching to his legs, which hold even more power. He attacks with Flying Planet Thousand Wheels, standing on one leg as the other swirls and slices through the air with unmatched strength and prowess. Even though Tanjiro can block the attacks and even tell where the hits are coming from, the intensity of this technique is too much for him to avoid being damaged. Tanjiro chokes out some blood, realizing it's as if Akaza's power stems from a magnet drawing him to Tanjiro's vital spots. As Tanjiro needs a moment to figure out what makes Akaza's attack so hard to avoid, he calls out Solar Heat Haze to create both some distance and a screen to prevent Akaza from seeing the way his sword warps with the flames. With all his speed and experience, Akaza's neck still gets sliced with this move. The demon had been looking very closely at the blade, but even he couldn't comprehend what happened in that moment. He thought it had somehow elongated from within the haze. The fight is set aside for a moment as young Senjuro Rengoku is shown praying for his father and Tanjiro's survival in this life or death fight with Muzan. In the past, his father Shinjiro had destroyed the history of these sun-breathing techniques that Tanjiro was meant to read, but Senjuro had uncovered some information. He sends a crow to give him the newfound writings. However, the letter is still in the crow's possession with no chance of Tanjiro reading it until he ends his fight with Akaza. At that moment, Tanjiro uses a Hinakami Kagura move, simply called Dance, with him slicing through the air straight downward, but Akaza catches the blade between his flattened palms with a menacing grin. Before he can break it in half, Tanjiro smashes him with his forehead, the one and only that renders others nearly unconscious, but even that does not loosen his grip. Akaza just continues smiling as he heals from the effects of it. Tanjiro instead swings his leg upward to send Akaza off balance in order to get his sword free. Akaza is nowhere near letting go. Foaming water then appears at the demon's wrist, slicing both hands off and getting Tanjiro out of that position at last. Giyu has returned, worse for wear and sore from being thrown, but pissed and ready to fight back. With a rare glimpse into Gyu's mind, he reveals that he dislikes fighting and confrontation, especially involving his sword, but within this fight, Giyu realizes he has gained a hidden strength that he had locked away. In a sense, Giyu has never needed to use his body or techniques before because none of the other demons he had fought were even a match. Tanjiro stares at his friend, looking worried, and Giyu is revealed to have gained the Mark, which is told to reduce the lifespan of demon slayers. But with the Mark, Giyu awakens to this inevitable battle, charging towards him with his sword. The water-breathing strike aims at his neck, with Akaza surprised he nearly can't dodge, jabbing at Giyu with a powerful punch right after. That misses its mark too. Giyu, having ducked to avoid it, comes back with another swing, water slashing the air in a circular motion. This makes Akaza jump back and Giyu wastes no time, closing the distance he had and ending up face to face with Akaza. Giyu unleashes Striking Tide, an elegant stroke of water forming an S in the air, and every part of Akaza's body is in danger. It does cut through Akaza's arm long ways, but he heals faster than ever, keeping eye contact with Giyu and ready for his next move. Tanjiro notices, even with Gyu's increasing speed, Akaza is starting to adapt to that as well. Humans aren't like demons, they don't have unlimited stamina or the ability to heal. If this goes on for too long, not only will Giyu lose his current pace, but they will not be able to get to Muzan. Trying to calm himself, Tanjiro returns to his earlier train of thought, what allows Akaza to read movement so clearly? And it hits him. Akaza mentions something called Fighting Spirit in his clash with Kyojiro. Tanjiro considers if it's comparable to his enhanced scent recognition, or Inosuke's tingling he feels when someone has malicious intent aimed at him. In a flashback, Tanjiro learns about how Inosuke's skin can sense attacks to his person, but on the other hand, if someone harmless or without ill will approaches Inosuke, he can't sense them, like the old lady from the Wisteria Crest house. With that in mind, Inosuke aspired to get close to opponents without showing hostility, that way it would be too late for them to react by the time he struck them down and killed them. Tanjiro considered that a lot easier said than done, but now, with the current struggle, it brings into question, what is fighting spirit and how can you dampen it? The time for contemplation ends as Tanjiro notices Giyu having more difficulty than earlier and uses dance to stab at Akaza again. Even from behind his neck, Akaza catches the blade, turning his head towards Tanjiro with an angry look. As he grips his sword tightly, Tanjiro attempts to break free, his body wide open for Akaza's thrust. But at the last moment, his body arcs away from the impact and Giyu slashes at his stomach, the blade barely doing any damage. Akaza throws multiple punches in all directions while still avoiding the water-breathing attacks, and Tanjiro figures out how to solve this. When Tanjiro's father was still alive, he was calm and peaceful. Even with his worsening illness, his moods were stable and remained an unchanging man. This wasn't to say he had no emotions though. Tanjiro vividly remembers his soft smiles and soothing voice. Back then, Tanjiro could not understand how his father danced Hinokami Kagura with his fragile body, especially since it demanded a lot of focus and effort and had to be performed yearly. Tanjiro had even offered to take his place, but his father admitted it was not taxing. It was even easier for him now as a grown man than it was for him in his prime. The trick to it was doing the movements efficiently and breathing properly throughout. Doing that process repeatedly creates a stillness within the performer in question because you have to be aware of every part of your entire body down to the blood in each vessel. With enough practice, controlling each inch and cell within the body becomes as easy as blinking. The final step of this dance leads you to the transparent world, which will only be achieved after pushing one's body to the furthest most limits. After this talk and 10 days before he passed, Tanjiro recalls his father defending him from a bear attack. His father had prepared bells and lights in case it appeared near their home, and it did. The bear stood almost 3 meters tall, but Tanjiro's father did not waver from confronting it. With the same tranquility as he showed his entire life, his father warned the bear that if it meant to harm his family, he would take its life. The bear had a crazy look, hungry and aggressive, but with what seemed like a single chop from the axe his father had been wielding, the bear's head hit the snow with a splash of red. There were 2 slashes in quick succession, but his father's scent never wavered away from his calm. This was meant as a lesson to Tanjiro should he need to defend himself in the future, as his father's face was already so gaunt from his illness. With that memory, Tanjiro recalls how he dodged an impossibly deadly strike from Akaza, and moments later, Giyu was not able to escape another. Tanjiro was able to see but a glimpse of that transparent world, a world that reveals the inner workings of even a demon like Akaza down to his muscles and bones. With the knowledge of the transparent world comes the ability to both see and react more quickly than ever before. Along the same vein, Tanjiro is aware of his own body's movements, gaining a more advanced control of them. Giyu, unleashing an attack in the form of a fearsome water dragon, continues to face Akaza in spite of his accumulating injuries. His techniques land, slashing at Akaza's neck, but never deep enough to decapitate him. Giyu wonders if it's a matter of skill or if Akaza is just too capable at predicting his next moves. Just from looking at him, it is evident that Akaza is an upper rank due to his focus on solely becoming the best fighter in history. Akaza catches up to Giyu in a flash, smiling in his face as he goads him. He can tell the Water Hashira has no more steam left and no more secret forms to show off. Tanjiro clears his mind, staring with an intensity he has never had, knowing his moment to get involved will be soon. Giyu strikes with another water-breathing slash, but Akaza punches the blade from below, breaking it cleanly in half. With all the confidence in the world, Akaza announces this is the end of their fight, aiming to put his fist right through his chest, the same way he did with Kyojuro. But before he can even touch Giyu, his entire hand is cut off. Akaza and Giyu share the very same expression of confusion as Akaza's hand lands with a plunk behind the demon. With unparalleled focus, Tanjiro is revealed to have used Hinokami Kagura to have severed the part. Giyu, noticing how different Tanjiro sounds and looks, cannot believe the efficiency with which Tanjiro saved his life. Similarly, Akaza's honed senses are screaming at him to take out Tanjiro before it is too late. With a sudden stomp, Akaza resummons his compass on the ground, using his final form, Blue-Silver Chaotic Afterglow. This accelerates his attacks, making it even harder for Giyu to keep up, but Tanjiro calmly observes, even having time to ponder about his father's teachings from the past. The transparent world is opened up before him, now able to see through Akaza and Giyu's bodies without struggle, and with a focus so concentrated that time seems to pass slower. Giyu is racked with pain, injuries unbearable now. Akaza's speed is so much higher that he let off 100 blows in an instant. Even having used Dead Calm, Giyu was unable to block most of the punches, though managed to avoid any fatal attacks. At that, Akaza praises him for surviving, unlike with Kyojuro and Tanjiro, completely unaware that Tanjiro is calmly standing behind him with his blade at the ready. Akaza truly has no idea that Tanjiro is there. Although speaking to himself, he urges Tanjiro on. This is Tanjiro's chance to attack the demon since he is oblivious and Tanjiro isn't as injured as Giyu. With something akin to a war cry, Tanjiro screams his intent, revealing his position to Akaza. The demon startles, his body reacting on instinct and cutting through the air with his arm, but he misses. Akaza wonders how Tanjiro survived, but knows it won't be long, not with his compass needle able to detect each and every attack through fighting spirit. And yet, as he thinks that, he realizes that Tanjiro has a strange air about him, a stark lack of fighting spirit, which shakes Akaza enough to the point where he loses focus. And with a glorious and fiery swing through the air, Tanjiro takes Akaza's head from his shoulders while having jumped above him. This leaves Giyu impressed and shocked, and Akaza in utter disbelief. Akaza simply can't come to terms with this development. In all his life, hundreds of years, he has never once crossed paths with someone who had no fighting spirit. Not even a newborn is without it. Almost as if fighting a tree, Akaza could not react in time to defend his neck. This mirroring Tanjiro, who compared his father to a calm plant. But the demon has lived too long to surrender just yet. Every situation can be adapted to, every battle can be won if he seeks to understand and react to it. That's what he likes to believe, but he's lost his head and lost his ultimate goal to Tanjiro. The peak that the Slayer has reached is the very same domain of supremacy that Akaza had been yearning to acquire for all these centuries. Yet with the knowledge that the peak can in fact be reached, Akaza cannot just die so easily. Before his head can fall, he grabs it with both hands, trying to force his head to reconnect with his body. But Giyu throws his sword like a spear and skewers his head, toppling it over. This means nothing to someone as unrelenting as Akaza. His mind reels with the need to become stronger, surpass himself, surpass death even. His head begins to disintegrate, with Tanjiro sighing in relief, his body way beyond its limit after having gained insight into the transparent world. Tanjiro's body trembles all over with the strain, and somehow, Akaza's body still stands tall, not disappearing like his head had. Giyu cannot believe his eyes, panic striking him. Akaza revives his compass on the floor with another stomp of his foot. With Tanjiro standing closest, Giyu worries he won't realize what's happening. A hand slices towards him, with Tanjiro barely avoiding the strike. The wound in Akaza's neck seals itself, trying instead to regrow the head he just lost. Tanjiro has no more strength to fight, and the kick Akaza's body sends at him cannot be stopped, slamming into his ribs. Tanjiro is sent into a wall, with the pieces crumbling around him. Some demons require more work to be slain, like Daki and Gyutaro, but Akaza was not one of those types. Instead, through sheer will, Akaza wants to evolve beyond what a demon is capable of. Tanjiro can tell this from just looking at him. Tanjiro also knows he has to keep fighting. Giyu needs help, but he passes out. Giyu, not wanting Tanjiro to die, forces his body to work again, grabbing his broken sword from the ground and rushing to Akaza. He lets off striking tide to slow the demon's approach to Tanjiro, slashing him across his chest multiple times. But Akaza's healing is still unmatched, even without a head. Giyu attempts a few more water breathing techniques, but his body cannot keep up with them. Instinctively, Akaza's body knows it has to end Tanjiro while he's unconscious and turns to him once more. Giyu, covered in injuries, blood covering most of his face, tells him to wait, insisting he face him first before he goes to take on Tanjiro. A thought reaches Akaza from his past, one of a man explaining how a sword is not needed to have an unbreakable spirit. The blade is within one's heart. Only a fist is needed to fight. Finding the straight thought irksome, Akaza prepares to kill Giyu, but a young woman grabs his arm. She calls him by his human name, Hakuji, tears in her eyes, begging him to stop. Although wanting to protect Tanjiro's life while he's passed out, Giyu knows he doesn't have much left in him. He's losing his vision. He's also feeling close to losing consciousness. He can't hear out of his left ear, he can't feel his right hand, but he still has a bit of strength. It's like he's been sprinting for an hour when he was only meant to do it for a few seconds. All his muscles are shutting down and refusing to work. And not to mention, he's facing upper rank 3, one of the strongest demons in existence. Regardless, Giyu keeps his resolve, wanting to protect those who matter to him. Akaza struggles on his own, wanting the young girl to let go of his arm as she continues to plead with him to come with her. Though he insists he must kill the demon slayer, she questions why that's important. He admits he has to be strong enough to bring it back, with his head growing in more than it had previously. It refers to the medicine that Akaza's father needed so long ago. Back then, when he was still human, he needed to be strong to fight and steal so he could ensure his father got his medicine. Because he wasn't strong enough, those he stole from beat him, and the magistrate was informed of his actions, punishing him for his crimes. He was also tattooed on both arms to indicate what he had done, with the lingering threat of a lost limb for the next time he committed such a crime. But no matter how much they told him this or tortured him, Hakuji laughed in their faces, his body covered in lashes and blood. The magistrate could not understand how an 11-year-old child was already so lost, constantly arrested and given lashes as punishment with no inkling as to any remorse. He was deemed a demon child. But Hakuji cared not for their words, even if they were true, so long as he could return home with medicine for his father. Unfortunately, that was not the case, the neighbors informing him of his father having hanged himself in shame. Hakuji stood there, stunned, his eyes still swollen from the fight earlier. He was left with a note from his father, which he brought with him to his father's grave. Because of Hakuji's actions due to their poverty and needing medicine, his father felt it was entirely his fault and needed to atone with his life. In other words, living by stealing from others is not a life worth living. Hakuji knew this wouldn't have happened if they weren't poor and didn't need the medicine in the first place. With the passing of his father clinging to his gravestone, Hakuji cursed the world if they treated them with such cruelty. Seeking revenge, or maybe just an outlet, Hakuji went on a rampage, fighting trained samurai with his fists. Every punch reminded him that he had lost his father to the circumstances of this world and its relentless strife. His body was not frail like his father's. He didn't mind taking the punishment for his stealing if it meant his father could keep on living. As his father's condition worsened, he wanted to get his hands on more things to help him get better. But that just led to him being caught and his father giving up on life instead. Hakuji, furious, continued to fight the samurais barehanded, stopping only when they were unable to get up. This was when a man in a white outfit clapped, impressed by his display of strength. The man had come to save Hakuji from the samurai, but instead arrived to find them all unconscious and the boy fine. With a smile, the man expressed how much promise and talent the boy had. Akaza, in the present, has no idea what he is seeing and who that man is. The man invited Hakuji to his dojo, but still infuriated, Hakuji wanted nothing to do with him. That is, until the man pointed out his tattoos and took a fighting stance, readying to give Hakuji a good lesson through his fists. In no time, Hakuji was being pummeled into submission, not even standing a chance. Later, the man ended up bringing Hakuji to his dojo after all. With his face swollen and bloody, Hakuji unwillingly followed the man who introduced himself as Keizo. The dojo was for a type of martial arts called Soryu, but had no students. Keizo asked Hakuji to take care of his daughter who was unwell for him, admitting that his wife recently drowned herself after her exhaustion was too much. And that struck Hakuji as he himself had just lost his father to suicide as well. This man could understand him. Hakuji still worried it wasn't a good idea for a criminal like himself to be in this dojo though, which Keizo laughed off and pointed out that he easily beat up said criminal. With Keizo feeling he was a burden that caused his wife's death, Hakuji understood the man more. It also dawned on Akaza why he could not stand Tanjiro. His very existence reminded him of this upsetting past he had long since forgotten. A memory of a young girl named Koyuki who he had instantly fallen for as he watched her cough into her hands while in bed, just like his father had. Akaza realizes that all the promises he had made in the past, his entire life even, were broken, and he was just a liar for uttering them. Hakuji, watching both his father and now Koyuki, saw that people with illnesses, though suffering immensely and wanting to be healthy, always apologized for causing trouble to those who cared for them. Koyuki was very weak, needing constant attention from Hakuji, so she felt responsible that he couldn't go outside and enjoy himself. But for him, it was just an extension of what he had done for his father. Koyuki insisted that he go to the fireworks at least, and he agreed to do so as long as she would let him carry her there to enjoy it as well. And if she wasn't able, they could go another year when she felt better. This made her cry, feeling sorry for holding him back, which Hakuji felt was unnecessary considering it could not be helped and also affected him. Later, as Keizo and Hakuji drank water from the dojo's well, Keizo pointed out how they were similar for wanting to protect others and fight for them, even comparing Hakuji to a protector of shrines, Komainu. In the past, Keizo had saved an elderly man from bandits and received this dojo as gratitude. Unfortunately, others had wanted the dojo and harassed Keizo and any students he had, which led to them all quitting. This was until Hakuji arrived and became a student as well as Koyuki's caregiver. After 3 years of living in the dojo, Hakuji turned 18 and Koyuki was well enough to live more normally. At the same time, Keizo had wanted Hakuji to be his successor, considering how much Koyuki liked him. She had never once mentioned this, so Hakuji was taken aback to say the very least. All he had known was fighting and being hated, so this opened up entirely new feelings within him. He hadn't thought it was possible to turn his life around like his late father wanted, but it seemed he could. These two people were so important to him that he had to visit his father's grave and let him know of the good news. But unfortunately, that would be the end of his happiness. Even without his demonic powers, Hakuji could feel that something awful was awaiting him at their dojo. And as he made his way back, he was told the well was poisoned and his future was shattered just like that. Having been unable to save his father, this just reminded him of how terrible his timing was when those important to him needed him by their side. During the fireworks in the past, when Koyuki was well enough to attend, she knew Hakuji was different because he saw a future for her despite her illness, which seemed incurable. She proposed to him there, letting him know that he was good enough. Not even her parents knew that she would ever recover from her sickness, and that was when he promised to take care of her for the rest of her life, which he had ultimately failed to in the end. The magistrate's office had kept track of not only their deaths, but the 67 others that were caused by the single surviving student, Hakuji. He had murdered the neighboring dojo's members with his bare hands, smashing their skulls, crushing their organs, tearing them limb from limb. This was all too gruesome for the maid who had found the scene, as she consequently lost her mind. Even while it was fact, it was so unbelievable that after 30 years, they destroyed this account of events. After the fact, Hakuji wandered the streets, covered in blood from the massacre, his fist still dripping with the evidence. Just then, none other than Kibutsuji Muzan himself found Hakuji. He had learned the story of what he had done and thought it must have been a demon. In this state, Hakuji cared not what Muzan was, telling him to move or he would kill him. But instead, his head was punctured with the demon's hand and injected with his blood. With Muzan's fist still inside his skull, Hakuji couldn't care about anything and found himself lost from the grief. Hakuji had lost his memories, becoming Akaza, who sought only to become the strongest as he had no one left to care for and protect. Akaza, unable to die but not entirely alive, knows he won't be able to be with his loved ones because of all the killing he has done. He didn't want to be reminded of his past, of how easily murdered his family was, of how precious their lives were. Tanjiro wakes up with a jolt, suddenly reminded he is still in a fight with the demon. At this point, Akaza's head was regenerated most of the way, with only a fraction missing. Not only would this mean he had surpassed death, but he has moved beyond demons. As Akaza prepares to use an attack on Giyu, who can barely stand, Tanjiro tries to rush in and help, but his grip loosens on his sword, sending it flying away. This doesn't stop Tanjiro from facing Akaza though, as he throws a punch that lands right in his face. This jolts Akaza back to his memory of Keizo punching some sense into him as a child. He was meant to be reborn into a stronger version of himself who protected others, but all he did was allow weak people to poison the well. He let his anger take over him. He ruined the symbol of Keizo's dojo by fighting for revenge rather than protection. He also broke his promise to his late father by not turning his life around. He truly is the weak one who needs to be punished. With Akaza preparing to use his annihilation type move, Tanjiro decides to try and run away with Giyu since they cannot face him in their conditions. Giyu screams for him to worry about himself instead, not wanting to lose another person that risked their life for him. But as Akaza unleashes his attack, he looks into Tanjiro's eyes and turns it on himself. Akaza's body, filled with holes and showing his spinal cord, still tries to regenerate even as he wills his body to stop. There is no regret for losing that fight. Tanjiro fought in an extraordinary way and won fair and square. Hell is waiting for him, and he'd like to go there quietly. Confused by Akaza's sense of gratitude and his movement stopped, he watches the demon's body walk towards something he cannot see. Akaza sees his father, hoping he at least is at peace now. His father smiles, petting Hakuji when he drops to his knees in guilt. Keizo takes the place of his father, his hand on his head. They still love and cherish him, but he can't join them in heaven with what he has done. The hand turns rough, gripping his hair tightly, turning back to Akaza and trying to drag him back down into the depths of his hatred. Muzan will not let him go, so Koyuki appears instead, both of her arms caressing his face, letting him know that he has done enough and there is no reason to keep on going. He looks up at her gentle smile, shifting from Akaza back to Hakuji, clinging onto her as tears drown his eyes. He begs for her forgiveness, having not saved her or her father or kept his promise to his own father. Koyuki cries with him, happy he's back to the sweet boy she knew and loved. With Tanjiro watching the demon on his knees, Akaza begins to dissipate like ashes. While his body disappears, flames engulf him in the afterlife, but Koyuki keeps holding on to Hakuji as they are swallowed by the fire. Facing the utter definition of relief, Tanjiro begins to tear up, so glad that they were able to survive. He remembers he has to get back to Tamayo, but passes out before he can even take another step. Giyu worries for him, but he too feels faint and loses consciousness, leaning on his sword. Both are out cold, but alive. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.